good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Coach Law. I hope you guys are having a good Sunday. It is been a really nice day here in Boston, and I must say, it's always interesting to come on and be on the show by myself. So this evening, I'm here alone. So it's going to be a solo show. And you guys know you tuned into the Urban Heat 98.1 FM, and we are radio with a purpose. And I am your host this evening, your favorite around the way therapist, Coach La. So tonight's conversation is near and dear to my heart. It's dedicated to my dad. Today is actually his born day. He passed away in 2018. I can't believe it's almost 5 years that my dad has been gone. And so I was contemplating going back and forth as to whether or not I should do a show tonight, given that it was his born day. And it's always a tough day for me. And I decided that it would be a really good idea if I did have have a show in honor of him. So for everyone who is grieving, this show is also for you and your loved one. You can call in this evening and have a conversation with me, 617-238-7111, because we're going to be talking about the stages of grief. And I know that for a lot of individuals, this is a tough topic. And I know that it is for me as well. So again, if you want to call in and join in on this conversation, you absolutely can. 617-238-7111. So tonight's conversation is all about grief. You may or may not know this, but there's 7 stages to grief. And I think I've pretty much gone through all of the stages. It looks like I actually have a caller now. So let's see. Let me see if I can get this caller to come on. Hello, caller. Can you hear me? You're on Conversations with Coach Law. Hello? Hello? All right, me and this telephone line. Oh, let's see. Let's try. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello? You're on Conversations with Coach Law. Hello? All right. I think I lost them, guys. All right. Maybe they'll call back. All right. So tonight's conversation is about grief. And so there's 7 stages. Some people may know that there's 7 stages to grief, but I think I've gone through all of the stages. And I think right now I probably cycle back and forth. So on a night like tonight, or day like today, which is my father's birthday, I think I kind of go back to some of the beginning stages. So why don't we talk about the stages? So again, if you want to call in and, give a testimony or talk about your loved one, which is one of the best ways to actually heal and to feel better, is to actually talk about your loved one. So if you want to call in and have a conversation with me, feel free to do so, 617-238-7111, and you can join the conversation. So the first stage of grief actually starts off with shock and denial. And it's not linear. So grief stages, you don't go in order. Often I think people think that you're going to go in order and you're going to go, simultaneously from one stage to the next. And you'll find, especially in big family systems, that everyone could be at a different stage. If you know what I'm talking about, please call in and share your experience. But I'm the oldest of 6. And we were all at different stages. Everybody was not at the same stage at the same time. So the first stage is shock and denial. Most people probably are familiar with this stage. It's almost like you go numb and you are in disbelief. The reality of the loss can feel very overwhelming, and you really want to avoid the pain. A lot of individuals at this point don't even really want to talk about it, or they can just shut all the way down. So you see that a lot. I think shock and denial is one that most people are really, really familiar with. If you are in the chat, shout out to everyone on Facebook and YouTube that is tuned in. If you are familiar with any of these stages, you can definitely join the interactive chat and just, share what stage you feel like you are in. So shock and denial is that first stage. And I think, where I'm at now is it's almost 5 years. And I think I'm in shock about that it's been 5 years. And it doesn't feel like it's been 5 years. It feels like it just happened. And I think that was another reason why today I wanted to do the show, because I think often when time goes by, you can kind of convince yourself almost like it's almost surreal. So in some ways, I think I can convince myself that I'm still going to get that call from my father, and then I have these reality moments that hit me that he's really not here. So that's what shock and denial feels like. The next stage, which I think a lot of people also are very familiar with, is pain and guilt. When the shock wears off, you can often just feel this suffering. If you've never lost a loved one, you may not even be able to completely understand what I'm saying, but it's like a knot. It's just so painful. It's type of pain that I wouldn't want anyone to feel. It's overwhelming. It's excruciating. You just feel heavy. You feel like, there's no point in even really going on. I think for me, that's the hardest stage, because you see your family and your friends in that stage, and watching people in that state is really, really hard. Especially if you happen to be in a different stage. So if you're still in shock, the last thing you really want to be around is family members that are in pain and guilt, because you really haven't even fully comprehended yet that the person is gone. This is why you'll see a lot of tension in large family systems, or people are having a really hard time getting along, or you hear arguments, you hear all those things, and it's pretty common, is because everybody's at a different stage, and you could be triggering to one another. I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned with my siblings, is that we were all in different stages, so it was kind of hard really to support one another. So again, remember, these aren't linear. I'm just going to go through them all, and you may find that you could be in any one of these stages, or you could revert back and sort of do a cycle. It could be repetitive. I always tell people, they say, things get better. I think it doesn't necessarily get better. It just changes. So again, if you want to call in, you want to share in on this conversation, 617-238-7111. You're listening to Conversations with Coach Law. Tonight, we're talking about the stages of grief. It is in honor of my dad, Kenneth Austin. May he continue to rest in peace. Today is his Bornday. And I figured I would do a show that would both honor his life and talk about going through this process, because I'm going through it real time with my family. And it's not easy, right? So I'm sure there's some other people out there that are also experiencing it, and it's not easy. I think for those that are support systems watching this, is to understand that these stages don't have necessarily a timeline on when they start in, or how often they can cycle back and forth, and that can be very challenging. So the best thing to do is just sort of be a listening ear, and that can be really hard. So you have to have your own therapist and practice self-care, because some people may stay in certain stages a lot longer than maybe your bandwidth of emotional tolerance can handle, and that's okay. Not everybody is really built to help somebody through their grief process, or you could be grieving as well, and it's a trigger for you. And I think, for my clients that are experiencing grief and then have a friend that's experiencing grief, it can be very, very challenging to try to be there for someone while you're also grieving at the same time. So patience, people. This is not an easy thing to do. It's very challenging. And we all have to give each other a little bit more grace and patience. So pain and guilt, I think, is one of the hardest ones that I've experienced and witnessed other people experience. I think way worse than depression. This one here, a lot of people, stage 3 is anger and bargaining. Most of us probably have seen this one. If you have, definitely put it in the chat. Again, you can call in. I think a lot of times anger is an emotion that we're all very familiar with. And the backdrop of that is usually the feelings of disappointment, despair, frustration, hopelessness. But often what it comes and looks like is irritability, lashing out, and blaming people for someone's death. And I think that can be really, really challenging to navigate, because at the end of the day, unless somebody is murdered, which that does happen often, unfortunately, in our community, a lot of deaths are due to people being murdered in gun violence. And what we can do is start pointing fingers at one another as to why and how that's happening, which is not usually very helpful. So really try to control this, especially when it's not the actual person who has committed the crime, because that definitely, I can understand blaming them. It is, in this case, their fault. But we often will blame the parents, or we'll blame the school, we'll blame the community for a lot of it. And that can be really harmful to relationships and may result in permanent damage, which is very difficult often to correct. And that can also go for like marriages and things. Like if your loved one, say your mom passes away and you're married, you could take that frustration out on your husband, and find different reasons to be upset with your spouse. So be mindful of, if you're using anger as your stage that you're in, be mindful of that. Great opportunity to seek out, support, and outlets, positive outlets to deal with the anger. I love boxing, so I recommend that. There's also Smash It here in Massachusetts. So all of our listeners in other places, if you have any anger rooms where you can go and you can break things, smash things, and get that energy out, that is really, really a good way to manage the anger as well, because anger is real and it can be useful, a useful emotion. Hey, Talise. Hey, Arlene. Thank you so much for tuning in, ladies. I appreciate your support tonight. Tonight is a difficult show for me, but not for the reasons why you may think it's a difficult show. I think on the one hand, it's demonstrating my growth, right? That I can sit here and talk through this and I'm not bawling. So I realize that I'm in a different stage in this moment, and the pain is not as excruciating. But I'm still sad and I really miss my dad a lot. So let me go on to the next stage, which is depression. Depression is another one I think most of us can recognize. It's reflection, loneliness. You are really not interested in engaging in activities that typically would bring you joy. You don't want to go out with your friends. You don't want to do anything that feels good. I think this often is also tied to guilt. What I found with a lot of my clients is that they feel like they shouldn't be enjoying their life, and they feel bad for enjoying their life because their loved one is no longer here. So it's almost like this is the stage that people feel like they should be in, which is depression, sadness, loneliness, and not wanting to engage or do anything. This is the very normal stage of grief. This is the stage that often people try to talk you out of and pull you out of and encourage you to do things. It actually is really good for you to actually sit and experience the grief and to recognize that you're sad. And some people might be like, really? That's contrary to popular belief. But I think often we're not allowed to grieve. I mean, most of these jobs that we have, we get 3 days for bereavement, maybe a week. So they expected, 2 to 3 days that you're supposed to be ready to engage and get back to life. I really don't know why that is a rule. I think people should at least be given at least 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks allows you, after you've buried your loved one or cremated them, time to just sit and reflect. And often that's not what we get. We're supposed to get right back to work. During the stage of planning out a homegoing service, a lot of people are still in shock and denial. A lot of people could also be in that stage of being angry and bargaining, which I didn't talk much about. So bargaining is almost like, well, why didn't they listen? Um, I wish it could have been me instead of them, or, if you anything where you're wishing that something alternative would have happened, or if I would have just been there, right? If I would have just answered the phone, this wouldn't have happened. Um, any of those type of statements where you're really beating yourself up that there's something you could have done to prevent it, or you could have done more. So you can find yourself sort of experiencing these all at the same time too. I don't want you to think that they're in silos where you're going to be depressed and then you're going to go angry and then you're going to have anger. You literally could have all of these happening at the same time, which is called the duality of emotions, where you could have everything sort of coming, which is why some people say they feel overwhelmed, and it's just too much. It feels really heavy. So depression is something that I see that's really common, that usually is the catalyst that brings people to therapy, is that their family members see them sad, depressed, and disconnecting. And by disconnecting and not doing anything that they would normally do, they get concerned or they get worried. The other thing that happens during this time frame is that people can start to engage in unhealthy activities, risky behaviors, to avoid the feelings. So we also want to really strongly encourage like drinking, using drugs, and all those type of things, especially during this stage. Really, really try to avoid doing that to try to not feel the pain. It's actually a lot better if you allow yourself to be sad and to think about what you loved about your loved one. What did they say that was funny? My dad had a great laugh. I just miss his laugh. He would make the most outlandish jokes. He was the life of the party, and he gave the best hugs. Oh my goodness, I miss my dad's hugs. He gave the best hugs. So like thinking about those things warms my heart and makes me sad at the same time. Y'all about to make me cry on this show. Um, yes, Arlene, definitely. There's definitely good days and bad days. Um, but I feel good talking about my dad. I think I've told listeners on multiple occasions that he is the inspiration, and I guess one of my biggest motivators for getting back into radio. When I started radio several years back, a lot of people don't realize that this isn't my first ride at the rodeo. My father drove for the city of Boston, and he drove the elderly to their appointments, and the elderly commission is what he was, a professional driver. So he always drove from Paul Revere to um, charter buses. That's just what he's always professionally did, was a driver. So he would listen to me on the radio, and back then I was on another radio station, but he could listen, and his passengers would listen, and he'd be like, yeah, that's my daughter on the radio. You hear her? She sound good, don't she? So, being on the radio makes me feel close to him. And I know he's listening from the heavenly sky. So I figured what better way but to be on the radio tonight. So anyway, as I digress. So we talked about depression. Then we go into a stage what we call the upward turn, stage 5. And it's where you start to adjust. Some people also call this acceptance, where you get to a place where you recognize and understand that we don't know when we're going to leave. My father used to always say to me, baby, I won't always be here. I'm not going to be here forever. I used to hate when he said that. But he had already lost both of his parents, and he understood death. My father was the go-to person for all my family members' funerals. I never really wanted to do that stuff. I was always the one like, I'm not going to be the one at the grave talking to the grave. And now I go visit my father and talk to the grave. It's an ongoing joke when I go visit him, that look at me, I done turned into one of the people coming to a grave talking to the grave. So, and I cry and I laugh and I update him on my life. And it's a very interesting, surreal experience to go to a cemetery to visit a loved one. If you've never experienced it yet, I really wish you don't. and you never would have to experience it. But I'm one of those people now. And the irony is where our studio is located, I literally pass where my father is buried when I come to the studio. So irony on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I feel like I was meant to be at the studio because my father's so nearby, right? So he's like my guardian angel. At least this is how I make sense of my reality. So when you think about acceptance is all about how do you make sense and adjust to your loved one no longer being here physically. You can also feel like your life has gotten a little calmer, and that can just be because at this point you've finished all the funeral arrangements, and maybe you've already started to clear out their belongings, like you've settled certain financial matters, so things might be settling down in that way. Depression may seem like it's lifting, not that it's gone, but it just may not be as intense as it was in the earlier stages. And again, when I say earlier stage, I'm not giving this a timeline. I'm just saying that you're moving through different stages. For some people, this could take years. Some people could be months. I think the significance of the relationship does have an impact, but not all of time. I've seen people grieving a parent that they've never met, and they're grieving what they wish they had. So it doesn't always have to be somebody that you were close to that could cause you to feel that way. Let's see. Good evening, Miss Sandra. Thank you for tuning in. So if you guys have a loved one that has passed away that you want to just recognize, throw their names in the chat. I want to, send well wishes and, send love and light to those that are grieving and can relate to where I'm at and where my family is at. I know as a community, we have a lot of grieving. A lot of people are grieving loved ones by natural causes, cancer, senseless gun violence. So it's just a lot of people that are managing these stages of grief. And it's hard. It's really hard. It's not easy. And so I think, we got to talk about death more often. And I will say my father did do that. He was constantly preparing me for the moment that he would no longer be here, to the point that I was like, would you stop saying that? But now that I look back, I hear his words of his reminders. Your father's not going to always be here. You need to spend time with me. You need to check on me. You need to hug me. You need to talk to me, because those things, reminded me to do it. When my dad passed away, his car went down. So he was without a car, and I was asked to pick him up from his second job. My father always worked 2 jobs. I was asked to pick him up from his second job. And what he didn't know is I didn't tell him the truth, right? That I was waiting hours, for him to get off. What I did instead is I just told him, yes, I could pick him up. He's like, baby, if it's going to put you out your way, don't worry about it. I was like, no, I'll be fine. Mind you, got off at 9:00. And that's just when I had started, doing my private practice, and I was working a job too. So I was like, I'll just stay late, do paperwork, and I'll come pick you up. I would sit outside his second job for probably about 90 minutes sometimes, waiting for him that week, reading books, listening to audiobooks, doing whatever I had to do. And I'm just so glad that I made that time and that I told him that lie. That's one lie I'm glad I made, because if I had told him, no, I get off at 7, or I get off at 6, he would have told me, don't worry about it. He would have found somebody else. So luckily I had that whole week with my dad after work to just talk about life, love, challenges in my, my relationships, just all kinds of things, being daddy's girl, issues I had with him growing up. Who knew that the week later my father wouldn't be here anymore? But we had some really deep conversations, ironically. I'm always having conversations, but I'm so thankful for that week that I had. And he reminded me even in that week that, your dad's not going to be here forever. So for all those that have loved ones that are still here, that are attempting to, connect or make things right, if you are open to it, reach back. Sometimes it's not worth it, y'all. I'm not even gonna lie. Some people, I'm, it's probably better off allowing it to be a done deal. But in some cases, those relationships are worthy of you clearing the air. So I'm glad I cleared the air. Me and my dad were in a good place when he when it was his time to leave. So we never know what's gonna what the number's gonna be after that dash. So just preparing ourselves a little bit better for that moment is something I think we could do better about talking about. And when I say that, having life insurance, making sure your documents, your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy, getting those documents together and putting it in a safe place for your loved ones. And that's not to say that you're expecting to die any day now. It just is a good thing to do. So my father did a lot of things right, but there was a lot of things that he missed, and I need to do better myself because I do have a son. So yes, my mom passed at 90 years old. My dad passed at 84 years old. Oh, Arlene, I wish I wish my dad would have lived that long. I hope I lived that long. But sorry for your loss. No matter if they go at old age or before their time, I think it's still always hard um, to say goodbye. So, Coach Law, it's harder when you have them longer. Yeah, you think maybe. I mean, I think it's hard either way. Um, some people have said, watching your loved one slowly pass away is harder than if they just die from natural causes. I think again that stage would be a bargaining stage, where you start to think if it only they were here, it's gonna hurt regardless, guys. Especially if it's someone you're close to. I think that's where it's significant. I had a really good relationship with my father, so the idea that I'm not gonna get those phone calls, um, that hurts. I still have voicemail messages that if I would have listened to it right now, I would be a mess. I would be in tears just hearing my father's voice. So I just know that it's definitely a challenging thing to move through these stages. And it hits you all of a sudden. Like you could be thinking you're fine, and anybody that can relate to that, let me know. Somebody's calling in again. Let me see if this call is gonna go through. Let's see, y'all. Let's see. Good evening and welcome to Conversations with Coach La. Who's there? Who am I speaking with?
This is Leroy. I do grieve your loss. I know you lost your parents.
Hi, Leroy.
It's one
Thank
thing
you for
about this
calling.
world, like God is always good. So it don't matter what we do, how we do it, as long as we can do it right. That's what I. And
Still there?
I'm here still.
Okay.
But you know what? You have to be strong because they ain't coming back, and we're going to meet them too. Mm-hmm. The world is what it is. But I always remember God put us here. Mm-hmm. When the time comes, whatever.
True.
I mean,
we don't know. We don't know when that time's coming, but it's coming.
The promise to us, no matter how it is, as long as if we can keep living peaceful, don't have to. There's a peaceful life. It's always a better way. Mm-hmm. I know God is good, so He wouldn't make us suffer. Mm. You have us live here forever. But my grief, my heart goes out to you and your family, brother and father. I lost my parents as well. Mm. In fact, I lost a cousin a week ago from yesterday, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, Leroy.
And I'm,
Yeah, I mean,
you gotta stay strong because if you fall in that you can't fall in depression. You can't really fall. I tell you, I married twice. I have one wife that I'm a widower, and she was a beautiful, just like my mother. She was a beautiful lady. I really.
Leroy, your phone's breaking up, Leroy. The last thing I heard was she was a beautiful lady, but I'm thankful that you're calling in tonight and just sharing this space with me to talk about grief. I'm not sure if you're still there. You can always give us a call back, but I think I lost you, Leroy. Give us a call back. All right, y'all. That was Leroy calling in to share his thoughts on grief and share his condolences. I appreciate the call, Leroy. So yes, I think my sister intervened, my dad and my mom, years before they passed. I think that says intervene. I'm sorry, guys. Some of the comments are a little small that I'm trying to read. Um, and then I feel you. It happened to me. Um, I'm gonna put it on the screen. I feel you. It happened to me today with my brother. Yes, yes. I mean, it comes and it goes. It definitely comes and goes. The feeling is not linear, as I said to you guys earlier. It's not a linear experience. It can hit you. You could feel like, oh, as Leroy was talking about being strong. Um, I'm gonna respectfully push back on the idea of being strong. And the reason why I'm gonna respectfully push back on that, because often that means not expressing or allowing yourself to go through the different stages. And what we can do is start to do avoidance. And with avoidance can come doing things like drinking, drugs, shopping, eating, anything just not to feel the pain, right? And you need to feel the pain, y'all. And I know that sucks, but just being able to say that you are hurting and that you miss your loved one or that you're angry about it, frustrated, that you need space, um, all of those expressions help you to heal versus masking that you just are going to be strong. And I think that is a big misconception, is that strength looks like not being sad or depressed and skipping that stage because it's not acceptable. Depression, having moments of depression, especially in terms of grief, does not constitute a mental health diagnosis. It is normal to go through these stages. So I want to normalize that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be down. It's okay to not want to engage in things. And I really wish that jobs gave more time for people to grieve. I think a good 2 weeks to up to a month is a good amount of time. I took a whole month off when my father passed away from work. I didn't see clients. I didn't do anything for a whole month, right? So then we get to stage 6, which is reconstruction and working through. As you become more functional and your mind starts to work again, you find yourself seeking realistic solutions to problems posed by life without your loved one. So that could be, maybe you haven't settled your estate. I think it took us as a family, shout out to my sister, Shamina. I think she was on the live. It was really tough. Me and her did a lot of the planning for my father's funeral. So we spent a lot of time together. Like picking out a casket was just like, daunting. To sit there and pick out a casket. And my father was 6'5", 3 something. So, his casket had to be a pretty large, long. And we needed to have 12 instead of 6 pallbearers. We needed 12 just to carry him. And so it was a lot of moving parts that we were there to support each other through. And I'm just thankful for her because we were there to lean on each other and we got it done. And normally she was the one helping my dad. I never did it. I'm not even going to tell y'all. When people passed away, that's just not my forte. I know I'm a therapist and all of that good stuff, but I've never been good with death, right? But when it came to my dad, I pulled the courage to do it. And I mean, if that's what you want to look at as being strong or having strength, then I guess I definitely pulled some strength to ensure that he got what he was supposed to get in terms of attention to detail. Um, I didn't tell you guys this part, but when my father passed away, it started at the second job. He actually passed out. They have it on camera. He was walking to his car. He hit his key fob to open up the car, and he just was seen. He literally just fell backwards and he hit his head on concrete. They administered CPR and they got him to the hospital. I believe my dad passed away that instantly. But it took a few days before they finally said that there was nothing else that they could do. That's where I learned that potassium was like a big thing. His potassium was low. He had a broken rib. His organs were failing. Um, Basically, it was cardiac arrest. So I think about all of that because when it came down to the final moments, I was in the room with my father laying on his chest, and the warmth, the final breaths, if there was anything in there of them taking him off all the machines, I was there for all of that. And that is still a surreal experience as well, because I was just like, I'm staying here. You guys are going to take all of these machines off of him with dignity. You're not going to just start snatching him off because you think he's already dead. You're going to do it with care. And I was so serious too. I was like, y'all are going to treat him like he is still here. I want you to be gentle. You take every tube and every needle and all these adapters and stuff off of him. I need you to treat him with care like he is still here. It was surreal. That part, and I played all of his favorite music. I played OJ's and I played Luther Vandross from my phone, and I just told him that it was okay, that he could go ahead and go. We were going to be okay, because he wanted to put so many things in place before he left this place. And you did a good job, Daddy. You did a good job, and I'm so thankful for you. So I hope you are proud. I hope you're resting in peace. I hope you're loving the fact that I still did the show tonight, because I'm not just rolled up in a ball, although I did eat ice cream early today, which was not a good idea, guys. Not a good idea. But that was my definitely was doing some emotional eating today. I had some Oreo cookie ice cream. I haven't had that in a long time. And my stomach is not happy camping with me. I had to take Tums. TMI, y'all, TMI. But yes, Arlene, thank you for sharing. Yep, I was right there the whole time. Arlene just said that she held her. Does anybody else have that experience? Did you get a chance to be there, either as hospice, as your loved one passed on, and watch that process? I've heard that's really hard as well, to go through that process and watch slowly as they're transitioning. That I was told that takes some time as well. There's different stages of that where they stop eating, lose taste, hearing, as they slowly transition over. So there's just so much to this next stage of life. I actually personally want to be like Cicely Tyson. I love how her last days were spent, where she got an opportunity to be interviewed. She finished her memoir and she passed away, still acting in her own home peacefully. So that's what I hope for myself. I would love Arlene to get to live to 90 years old, as your parents were able to do in my 80s and 90s. I would love to be able to do that. Hello, Social Work Sunday Tea. Thank you so much, Shakia, for joining Mina Shea Style Journey. Shout out to my sister, Chandra Jackson. Thank you all for tuning in. Once again, you're listening to Conversations with Coach La. Tonight's conversation is about the stages of grief. And I want to send love and light to anybody out there who is, experiencing the stages of grief and going through this, from the loss of a loved one. I know a lot of people who are listening probably have, or at some point in your life you will, or you might have someone close to you that's going through this. So these stages are really important to know. I think being the therapist in my family, and also the oldest of my of my siblings, bringing up the stages of grief, they actually went and they looked it up and they read it, and I think it helped us out a lot to be able to support one another in the different stages and processes that we were in. I think that helped us not have a lot of interfamily arguing. We got to a place that we were just like, you got to do whatever you need to do to work through it. And there wasn't a lot of pressure that you had to be in one stage or the other. And we realized how hard it was for, some of us to support one another because we were in different stages. So now we're at stage 7, and that's acceptance and hope. This is the last of the 7 stages in the grief model. You learn to accept and deal with the reality of your situation. And acceptance does not necessarily mean instant happiness. Really important to understand that you can have acceptance and still not be happy. You can have acceptance and still be experiencing depression. So I want to really make sure everybody understands that you could be experiencing these stages in conjunction with one another. You get all of them simultaneously. This is just a guide. This is very individualized. This isn't a be all end all. This is just to bring some self-awareness to what you might be experiencing, so that you can label it and extend grace to yourself and others and understand what's happening. Some people don't understand how some people could be already at acceptance and hope and somebody else is angry. And so if you're in acceptance and hope and you don't understand the stages of grief, you could be resentful or upset or judgmental of another family member that's in a anger bargaining stage. You won't get it. You won't understand, well, why are you showing up like that? Like eventually you knew Ma was going to pass, or eventually you knew grandma was going to leave. So why are you so angry and blaming everyone? Like, this is what happens. And people then could be upset with you if you're in acceptance and hope and think that you don't care. Oh, you didn't love her. You just didn't love her like I loved her. And that's not really true, everyone. And I think that is the hardest part, is that no one person experiences grief the same. And we can judge and shame each other because we're in different stages and think that we should be doing it the same way. And that's not true. Or we can try to rush people through it and come on. Don't be depressed. You don't have to be depressed. Come on, come outside. Let me get you outside, and not understanding that that's not honoring the space that they're in. And sometimes what you need to do is just be able to sit with the person in their grief. And that's hard for people who are not going through it to do, because you don't want to see that person hurting, sad, in pain. So you're so uncomfortable with the fact that they're uncomfortable that you want to move them from being uncomfortable so that you're not uncomfortable. I know that was a mouthful, but ultimately, if you're going to support somebody in the stages of grief, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You can't rush them through it because you want them to get back to how they were and get over it quickly, because that would make you feel better. That's not really supporting the person then. So if that's where you are, you may want to not try to support them, because you actually could be making things worse. And a lot of people fall out with each other, when someone passes away, for this reason, because we're not honoring each other's space and we're not extending enough grace. We're not extending enough grace to one another. Thank you, Moonlight, for joining and chiming in. Oh, yes, she was in hospice. So she passed in 2021, and she was at home in her bed. I kissed her bye, and she passed 15 minutes later. when I was on my way to the station. Oh, my heart goes out to you, Moonlight. Yeah. Yes. 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 I felt that. I felt that all over my body. I just think that we often just don't realize just how hard grief is, and it just is. I wrote earlier on my Facebook post that grief doesn't end, it just changes. And I really want to stress that, is that it just changes, and being patient with yourself and talking about your loved ones. I think I still talk about my dad. Y'all probably are sick of me talking about my dad so much. I'm always reminding people about my father. Well, guess what? Be sick of me, because I'm going to do it. It makes me feel better. It's not about y'all. It's about me. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel good to know that I'm doing radio and that's something he wanted me to do. It makes me feel good that my course, Bet on Self, is named after something that he said to me. These are things that I have used to help anchor me to a place of getting here. And maybe you want to call it acceptance, hope. I call it getting to a place of just being able to function. Like, I think that's where I'm at. I'm able to function and get through the day without busting out in tears as much as I used to. But I miss my dad every day. Every day. And if anything, there's moments where I'm like, wow, I wish I would have called him more. So you see how quickly I just went back into bargaining? Just like that, right? I wish I would have called him more. I wish I would have, spent more time with him. Maybe I should have brought him more good food. And like this, that you have these moments that, maybe I could have did more. But at the end of the day, we all have our lives to live. We all have our lives to live. And when you think about your life and you get blessed to open your eyes tomorrow, what are you doing with it? Right? What are you doing with it? How are you honoring the individuals that you miss and you grieve? What's one thing that they said or that they told you about life, life lessons, advice? Tap into that, pull your courage and pull your ability to live this life that you still have to honor them. And that's what I think about with my father. He worked 2 jobs all my life. I have all these accolades and degrees. The one thing I can do is what he said, was bet on myself. That's how I can honor my father, is to live my life to the fullest and do big, bold things that makes him smile from the heavens, right? Like, I'm out here and I'm going to do the damn thing, right? I'm a bet on myself, and that is what I hear in my head. So if y'all see me and you getting sick of me, just know that ain't me, it's my dad. My dad is like, yeah, go out here and give him hell, baby. So that helps me. So what you got to do is think about, what are some nuggets, what are some lessons, what are some insights that your loved one gave you. And even if it wasn't the best relationship, because a lot of people are struggling with relationships that were toxic, unhealthy, trauma, neglectful, that you still grieve this person or you still have regrets, is to think about what about that relationship did you learn that you can apply to future relationships. And if it's a parent that didn't do or didn't give you what you needed, how can you be different with your own kids? So this is what Bet on Self is all about. Like, when are you going to take responsibility for you? Things are not your fault. People make mistakes. People are human. People mess up a lot, but you have an opportunity, if you're still here, to live and to make new choices and to use the information of how things made you feel to not perpetuate that same behavior into the world with your own kids and your own family, your own husband, your own wife. Like, what are we going to do differently to make this a better world and a better place? Because just simply being angry and upset that people are no longer here isn't adding to the quality of life, your quality of life, or the next generation's quality of life. So what are we going to do differently? How are we going to utilize what we know so that the people that we care about's lives weren't, they didn't leave here in vain, especially if they were, taken before we believe their time. Even though I've started to reconsider that too, like everything is happening for a reason in the world. So what are we supposed to learn from these things, and how can we make it better? So here at the Urban Heat, we're actually tomorrow going to be having a conversation with the community about uh, gun violence here in Boston, especially. So it's called Solutions to the Streets. It's a violence forum that we're going to be hosting, and it's going to be at the William E. Reed Auditorium, and that is tomorrow, and it's going to happen from 5:30 to 7:30, and that is being sponsored by Harvard Street Neighborhood Health Center, 365 Dad, in the Urban Heat. So, a lot of people are grieving because of gun violence. This is a great opportunity for all the community stakeholders to come out, politicians, community members, families, to come out and have a conversation about solutions. How can we bring some solutions to the street, help our kids? Because grief also, just because my show is getting ready to end shortly, I just want you to understand that grief is just not about death. Grief also comes from lack, right? Not having something, missing out on things. So if you think a lot of the things I think that are happening in our community are people are grieving opportunities, they're grieving jobs, they're grieving, love. We are hurting as a community. And when you're hurting and you feel helpless and you're angry and you're depressed, you don't value life. So we got to start valuing life. We got to start valuing the opportunity to change and make a difference. We got to be change makers. So, I hope tonight's show um, inspires somebody to bet on self. I hope it encourages you that you're not alone in this grief journey. And I hope that you find some value in understanding the different stages. If you are just a supporter, a caregiver, to give more grace to people that are in a different stage than you are, to talk about this as a family. If you're grieving, to go research this, go look it up and understand the stages. Not to say that this is the be all end all, but just form a self-awareness, insight, and a guide, perspective, so that you'll be able to navigate it a little bit differently, not take things personally, and potentially even offer support or suggest when somebody may want to reach out to a therapist or a spiritual guide, get spiritual guidance, because each one of these stages brings different sets of emotions. Arlene, Sandra, Moonlight, thank you all for tuning in. Talise, um, Shakia, thank you all for listening tonight. I appreciate you joining in and just being with me in this space this evening as I honor my father's life. Mr. Kenneth Austin, you will forever be here because you're always with me. And I miss you so much, Daddy. I really, really do. And yeah, grief is hard, you guys. It is really, really, really difficult. It's a hard thing. I got through this whole show before I started to shed a tear. So it is very challenging. And those that are going through it, my heart goes out to you. I'm sending you love and light. And love somebody, call them, give them a hug. Hugs. Thank you guys. It is not an easy thing. And the thing is at some point in your life, you will go through it. I try to prepare my son for the day that it will happen so that he can be prepared, but you really can't prepare for it. When it happens, you're going to go through these stages. So I just wanted to give you guys some nuggets, and I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you will go and educate yourself and share this information. That's my call to action, is to share this with someone else that might be going through it and experiencing grief, and reach out to them and give them compassion and patience with yourself and grace with yourself too. So You've been listening to the Urban Heat 98.1 FM. This is Conversations with Coach Law. We are radio with a purpose. I'll be back next Sunday for another conversation, and you guys continue to be great, to be awesome. And I'll see everyone next week. Have a good night.